Picture this. You're standing in line at your favorite coffee shop, and suddenly someone cuts in front of you. Your heart races, your jaw clenches. You spend the next 10 minutes replaying the scenario, imagining what you should have said, how you should have reacted. Sound familiar? Welcome to the exhausting world of trying to control everything around you, a guaranteed recipe for imbalance. Epictetus, a philosopher who knew a thing or two about powerlessness, he was literally a slave before becoming one of history's most influential thinkers, delivered a truth that cuts through centuries of human struggle. If a person is careful within the bounds of their conscious choice and in actions of conscious choice, they will gain the freedom to avoid. But if they try to be careful beyond the bounds of choice regarding things they cannot control, trying to avoid what others control, such a person will be agitated, imbalanced, and frightened. Here's the kicker. We've got it backwards. We live in a culture that tells us control equals power, that anticipating every possible outcome makes us smart, that worrying about things beyond our influence somehow prepares us for life's curveballs. But this ancient wisdom reveals something radical. The very act of trying to control the uncontrollable is what creates the chaos we're desperately trying to avoid. Think about your last sleepless night. Were you lying there, worrying about something you could actually change right then and there? Or were you spinning mental wheels about your boss's mood tomorrow, your partner's reaction to something you said, the weather for your weekend plans, or the state of the economy? Most of our mental energy gets burned up in the futile attempt to manage variables that exist entirely outside our sphere of influence. The Stoics understood something profound about human nature. We are meaning-making machines. We don't just experience events, we interpret them, judge them, and create stories about what they mean for our future. A delayed train isn't just a delayed train. It's a catastrophe that will ruin our day, make us look unreliable, and somehow reflect our inability to plan properly. But here's the revolutionary insight. The train delay is neutral. Our interpretation of it is where the suffering begins. When we try to control outcomes that depend on other people, market forces, natural disasters, or pure chance, we set ourselves up for a particular kind of torment. We become like someone trying to steer a car while sitting in the passenger seat, frantic, frustrated, and ultimately powerless. The steering wheel is right there, but it's not connected to anything we can actually influence. This doesn't mean we become passive or indifferent. It means we become surgical in our focus. We identify the thin slice of reality that actually responds to our choices and pour our energy there. Everything else? We learn to dance with it rather than wrestle it into submission. Now, let's shatter a popular myth about inner peace. When most people imagine a Zen philosopher, they picture a monk sitting serenely by a temple among quiet green peaks, removed from the chaos of ordinary life. The Stoics? They're the complete antithesis of this image. Picture a Stoic and you'll see a merchant in the marketplace, a senator in the forum, a brave wife waiting for her husband to return from battle, a sculptor working in her studio. Yet the Stoic's image is filled with that same inner peace. This is where the rubber meets the road. True balance isn't found in isolation from life's storms. It's discovered right in the middle of them. The marketplace merchant dealing with difficult customers, the working parent juggling career and family demands, the entrepreneur facing an uncertain market, these are the real testing grounds for philosophical wisdom. Epictetus reminds us that tranquility and stability are the result of our choices and judgments, not our environment. You could retreat to the most peaceful monastery in the world, but if you haven't learned to manage your internal response system, you'll find reasons to be agitated even there. The monk next to you chews too loudly. The meditation bell rings at inconvenient times. The schedule feels too rigid, or perhaps too loose. Here's what's liberating about this understanding. You already have everything you need for inner stability right where you are. That demanding job, that complicated relationship, that financial pressure you're facing, none of these situations inherently create imbalance. They're simply the raw material that reveals whether you've learned to distinguish between what you can and cannot control. Consider Sarah, a project manager who used to arrive at work each morning already exhausted from mentally rehearsing every possible way her day could go wrong. She'd craft elaborate contingency plans for scenarios that might never unfold, send follow-up emails to ensure her team was thinking about things the right way, and lose sleep over client reactions she couldn't predict. Sound familiar? Sarah was trying to be careful, beyond the bounds of choice, as Epictetus puts it, and it was making her life miserable. The shift came when she realized she was spending 80% of her mental energy on the 20% of outcomes she couldn't influence. Instead, she began to focus intensely on her actual sphere of control, the quality of her own work, the clarity of her communication, her preparation for meetings, and her responses to unexpected developments. Paradoxically, by loosening her grip on outcomes, her actual effectiveness increased. Her team noticed the change immediately. She became more decisive, less anxious, and surprisingly more influential. This is the Stoic secret hiding in plain sight. The people who seem most in control are often those who've stopped trying to control everything. They've learned to channel their energy into the narrow band of reality that actually responds to their efforts, and they've made peace with everything else. But here's where this gets really interesting, and where most people miss the point entirely. The goal isn't to become emotionally numb or resigned to whatever happens. It's to develop what we might call intelligent responsiveness, the ability to engage fully with life while maintaining your center of gravity. Think of a skilled sailor navigating stormy seas. They don't ignore the weather or pretend the wind doesn't exist. They study the conditions carefully, adjust their sails accordingly, and respond to each wave with precision. But they never waste energy cursing the storm or demanding that the ocean behave differently. They work with what is, not with what they wish were true. This is the profound difference between acceptance and resignation. Resignation says, "Nothing I do matters, so why try?" Acceptance says, "I can't control the storm, but I can absolutely control how I sail through it." One leads to apathy, the other leads to empowered action. The most successful people you know, whether in business, relationships, or personal growth, have typically mastered this distinction. They've learned to identify their actual decision points and pour their energy there. They've stopped burning mental fuel on scenarios that exist only in their imagination. They've developed the rare ability to be simultaneously fully engaged with their circumstances and emotionally detached from outcomes they can't guarantee. This creates a particular kind of freedom that most people never experience. When you're no longer dependent on external validation, perfect conditions, or other people's cooperation for your inner stability, you become genuinely unstoppable. Not because you control everything, but precisely because you've stopped trying to. The businessman who can present his best proposal and sleep soundly regardless of the client's decision. The parent who can guide their teenager with love and wisdom while accepting that they can't control their child's choices. The artist who can create authentically without being crushed by criticism or inflated by praise. These people have discovered something radical. True security comes not from guaranteeing favorable outcomes, but from knowing you can handle whatever outcomes actually arise. Even more surprisingly, this approach often leads to better external results. When you're not desperately attached to specific outcomes, you make clearer decisions. When you're not frantically trying to control other people's responses, you communicate more effectively. When you're not paralyzed by worst-case scenarios, you take more intelligent risks. The ancient Stoics understood what modern psychology is just beginning to rediscover. The attempt to control what cannot be controlled is not just futile, it's the primary source of human suffering. But the inverse is also true. Learning to focus exclusively on what you can actually influence is the most direct path to both effectiveness and peace of mind. So, the next time you find yourself agitated, imbalanced, or frightened, ask yourself this simple question. Am I trying to control something that's actually outside my control? If the answer is yes, you've just identified your real problem, and more importantly, you've just discovered the path back to your center. The storm may continue raging around you, but you'll be sailing through it with the skill of someone who knows exactly where their power lies.